I want to welcome people back for our 48th weekly Zoom interview. And my guest today is Linda Britt, who is a recently retired professor from the University of Maine at Farmington, where she taught Spanish. How long were you at the university?
33 years.
Wow. Does it seem like it flew by?
Um, yes. I mean, I look back and think, 33 years ago, that's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it flew by, but there was so much that happened over those 33 years that it also, in a way, seems like forever.
Mm-hmm. So the reason I wanted to speak with you is you have a very interesting connection to Margaret Chase Smith. And I'm thinking, is about 2009 sound right when you would have contacted the library?
That's about right, I
Okay.
think.
I actually have a photo that I'll show eventually, and I'm pretty sure the date on it was 2009. But anyways, you got in touch with us because you had this idea that you wanted to do a play about Margaret Chase Smith. And can you tell us what the genesis of that idea was?
Um, People tend to be surprised by this when I
Well,
tell
I
the
know I
story.
was. Why is a Spanish professor getting in touch with us about Margaret Chase Smith?
Right. Well, um, in addition to teaching Spanish and literary translation and a couple of other things while I was at UMF, I also taught several first year seminars.
Mm-hmm.
And first year seminars at UMF are designed to help new students transition to college life and get them um, actively engaged. They've evolved over the years.
Mm-hmm.
When I taught the one that we're about to talk about, the main idea was to get students used to academic
Mm-hmm.
reading and writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so professors chose their topics, and I taught a course, a first year seminar on the Spanish Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
And it was during that course that I made the decision to write this play about Margaret Chase Smith.
Mm-hmm.
Not that she was an inquisitor by any means, but in addition to dealing with the Spanish Inquisition itself, um, the course included other types of inquisitions.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about and read about uh, asylums and mental institutions during the 19th century, for example. But we also, and there's the truck, we also read about McCarthyism
Mm-hmm.
and the kind of inquisition that entailed, tracking down anybody that had any potential, right, connections to the Communist Party or things along those lines. And uh, and of course, when we read about the McCarthy era, the most famous thing about it, at least for people in Maine,
Mm-hmm.
is Margaret Chase Smith's Declaration of Conscience speech.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked about that in class, we read about it, and then I just, as an academic, I get curious and I started reading more about Margaret, and that spawned, the idea for the play.
Mm-hmm. Can you give our viewers a brief overview of the Spanish Inquisition? What was it about?
Um, a brief overview. Okay, so the Spanish Inquisition began at the turn of the 17th century in Spain. Actually, probably began before that. When, yeah, I've got the wrong century. Sorry. When Spain became a country,
Mhm.
in when it united, which was in 1492, which is a banner year for Spain, right?
Mhm.
Um,
To
the
remind people, Columbus
Yes, for
coming to,
example.
yeah.
Um, uh, Also, the first Spanish grammar was published in 1492, which I'm sure will be of interest to everyone.
Well, these things are often related because grammars are trying to standardize a language to unite a nation.
There you go. So before that time, Spain, the peninsula was a bunch of provinces, right? It did not. Uh, um, it did not. It had. I mean, most of the people in this peninsula were speaking Spanish, but it had been at that point the um, some of the kingdoms. I mean, I call them provinces, also
Mhm.
kingdoms. Had been engaged in retaking the peninsula from the Musulmanes, the people who had come from up from Africa and invaded the peninsula and fought, the remnants of the Romans there. I mean, anyway, that lasted from the year 711 to the year 1492.
Mhm.
And at that point, the whole peninsula, except for the western part, right, which became Portugal, became united. Well, there were a lot of, before that time, there was a large Muslim population in the peninsula and a large Jewish population in the peninsula. They, as I understand it, and I'm not a historian, but as I understand it, the 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 new king and queen of Spain and their government, that was
Ferdinand and Isabella.
exactly,
Yeah.
um, or as we call them, Fernando and Isabel.
Thank
um,
you.
uh, it were okay. All of this was closely tied to the Catholic Church,
Mhm.
right? The vestiges of the Roman Empire, um, and it became a central goal to completely rid the peninsula of any vestiges of uh, any religions that weren't the Catholic religion.
Mhm.
And so Jews were targeted, Muslims were targeted, um, and uh, the church was in charge basically, and so they didn't like witches. They didn't like they targeted mentally ill
Mhm.
people because they thought they were that way because they weren't following, the right God.
Mhm.
And it was brutal. Witches were burned at the stakes. There was torture. There was it was um, not, shall we say, a stellar, um, shining moment
Mhm.
in Spanish history.
Did it have an end, or did it just sort of slowly fade away?
Um, it faded and faded, and then but it had resurgences because there was a resurgency in the 19th century.
Okay.
Um, but there was an end date, and it was it no longer exists.
Okay. So out of that, you make this connection to American history and the McCarthy era and the Red Scare and the
Yep.
anti-communist movement after World War II. Um, and you make this transition to the way you're going to tell the story is through a play. Had you ever written a play before?
I had.
Okay.
I had.
Yeah.
First play I ever wrote was a musical that I wrote with my son Colin, who's a
Okay.
composer.
Yeah.
And he was 13 at the time, and we wrote a little play called Billionaire Vegans, which has had a life of its own.
Okay.
I mean, it was a silly concept. It's like this guy who's a billionaire and a vegan hatches this plot to convert the
Because that
everyone.
was part of the Inquisition, is there was an option that you could convert the conversos,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Although conversos, the converted Jews, were never accorded the same rights and privileges as what were called old Christians.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he wanted to convert the population. This character, this billionaire, was named Eaton Veal, and so he wanted to turn everybody into vegetarians.
Mm-hmm.
And so he bought a whole franchise of hamburger joints called Burgers and More, and they put this secret ingredient in their milkshakes, which somehow or another magically kept people made people sick or something when they ate meat, but the but the milkshakes were addictive, so they kept coming back. And so anyway, it was a silly concept, but we had the best time with it, and we performed it as a one act, and then we developed it into a 2-act project where in the second act, Eaton Veal goes to Argentina to deal with the beef problem there. So yeah, I had written that, and I had written actually a couple of others. I had written a series of 1-acts based on Norman Rockwell paintings.
Oh, interesting.
I had Colin and I wrote another musical, a divorce revenge musical called Let Me Count the Ways. But it was the 1-acts, the Rockwell 1-acts, I think, that and a straight play about a woman with Alzheimer's that I had written most recently when I decided to write the play about Margaret.
Mm-hmm. So you had experienced writing plays, and you had also staged some of them as well.
Yes, I had directed them. Yes.
Where does your theatrical bug come from?
Well, that's actually, I blame on Colin as well.
Okay.
He was a kid, an artsy kid who loved music and loved theater, and so he got involved with community little theater in Auburn.
Okay. Yeah.
And he was probably 11 or 12 at the time, and of course, 11 and 12-year-olds need rides to the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided to volunteer at CLT because I thought, this is a way I can be useful. I can be around my son, we can, and that's how I got involved in theater. I started just by volunteering backstage, that kind of thing. And then directing came, I think, because directing is so much like teaching.
Interesting.
And so it was familiar to me in a way. And that's I blame Colin for all things theatrical in my life.
That's an interesting,
including my husband now of nearly 15 years, whom I met in theater. Stan, you know him.
Yes. So tell us about the process of getting this play that you've written staged. And as you do that, I may actually shift over to share screen because I have some pictures of people you may mention along the way.
Um, Mrs. Smith, how I got it
Yeah,
staged.
yes, yeah.
Okay, well, so
Or
and
even about the writing process. I mean, how long did it take you to write this play?
uh well, so the first thing, okay, to write the play, first I needed to do more reading about
Mhm,
Margaret because in order to put the play in what I thought of as her voice,
mhm,
I really had to get to know her better. So I read books about her. I watched YouTube videos
mhm,
of her.
mhm,
Um, I I used all the resources that I could find, right, to get to know her, and I felt like putting the character, her character, in a in another play, right, in a play that included a lot of other people.
mhm,
I felt like that would not get her voice across as much as I wanted to. I
mhm,
just felt like she had I mean, she had an amazing life and she did so much and was such a pioneer,
mhm,
right? And and I mean, some of the stuff I didn't even include because
mhm,
there's just more material there than could be, easily put into an hour package, which I thought was about what we were looking for a
mhm.
one person show. Um, and then I thought her telling her own story would work
Mhm,
if we got the right actor.
mhm,
And there I was very lucky in
mhm.
terms of finding Sally Jones.
Uh,
Um,
but I know there were other actresses.
yeah. So the first, in fact, I think you saw the version that was at UMF when we did a staged reading. I think we did that.
Yes, at UMF, would that have been the first?
Yeah,
Because then I saw it in Auburn as well. But by the time it was Auburn, then it was Sally, right?
that's right. When
Yeah,
you came to, yeah, at Lewiston in the downstage.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, no, the first actor was Pat Phillips, Patricia Phillips. There
She's
she is
on
with
screen.
Andrew Harris
Yeah.
and me before I let my hair go. Yeah, that and we came up um, to the library. Is this the picture in the library?
It is. Yes, it's dated February 2009.
Okay, then. Um, yeah, Pat ended up stage managing the course. I think the play.
Hmm.
And I think she and I both decided that she wasn't the right Margaret.
Hmm.
Um, but she was great. She was helpful because every time we do a reading, you know, uh, I learn more.
Hmm.
And so the play evolved while she was working. She did the um, she did the one at UMF, and then we went to Edward Little High School,
Hmm.
and she visited a couple of classes and did the play there. Andrew Harris, of course, was at that time the director of LA Arts
Okay.
in Lewiston, Auburn.
And so I saw the staged reading at UMaine Farmington, and then um, you took it into the high school as well.
Yeah, at Little.
Okay.
And it was a year later. It was
Okay.
actually 2010, about the same time of year that we had the full production with
Okay.
Sally.
It's because I'm recalling that when this photo that people are seeing at that time, I think Andrew Harris had some ambitions of things that he would have liked to see the play do. I think he was trying to get money to maybe take get more into schools. at that
Right.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually he applied for and was awarded a grant. Um, and then Andrew left LA Arts, and whoever took over LA Arts after that then decided not to pursue
Okay.
that. But yeah.
So the next transformation is, this is the actress that you settle on
Yes, that
portraying.
is the magnificent Sally Jones. Yes.
And
Sally.
here's the transformed Sally Jones as Margaret Chase Smith.
Yes, in our set, because we were performing in this small space, and it transformed into her office.
Mhm. Would this have been in Lewiston?
This was, yes, Lewiston on Lisbon Street, in a basement that we converted into a theatrical space the year before. We had started, Stan and I, and some other people that we had worked with, had started a small theatrical company called Out of the Box Theater.
Okay.
And we partnered with LA Arts to convert the space, which had just been a basement space, and we performed multiple times in it over the next few years.
Mm-hmm. And I think the last thing I have is just one of the playbills, which
that's the poster designed by Jeff Soifer. I want to give him credit for that. And yes, there's our logo down at the bottom,
Mhm.
Out of the Box Theater.
Yeah. And tell me about your choice of title.
Out of the Box?
No,
Or Mrs. Smith
of the play.
Mrs. Smith goes to Washington.
Washington.
Well, of course, it was a play on the Jimmy Stewart movie,
Mhm.
right? Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and that's what we had of Mrs. Smith. So
Yeah.
it just seemed like the right choice.
Mhm. Well, then I'm noticing here the subtitle, An Evening with Senator Margaret Chase Smith. And that is sort of the brilliance of the production and the brilliance of the performance, is that people came away feeling like they really had spent an hour with Margaret Chase Smith.
They did, and Sally was so great at this. So after the scripted performance,
Mhm.
Sally in the audience would take a little break, and then those who wanted to stay, and almost everybody did. I mean, almost no one left during this break. And then Margaret would come back on the stage, Sally is Margaret, and have a seat, and then just have a conversation with the audience. And she decided very early on, Sally did, that she didn't want to answer questions about current politics.
Mhm.
And so, people would want to ask her things like, well, what do you think about, what's going on in Congress now, or whatever? And
Mhm.
and she really did not want to. So she would start the conversation by saying, tell me maybe how you met me, or what your memories are, and it was just so wonderful. I have a good amount of it on video, by the way.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, were you at the opening night performance? Do you remember?
I don't think so.
Because Larry Gilbert, who had been mayor of Lewiston and had been,
Yeah.
involved in politics,
Yeah.
he raised his hand first when she said, and he said, "Senator, I was at your funeral." And Sally, without missing a beat, said, oh, how did I look?
And,
And it just, and then he told the story of how they
yeah.
had met each other. Um, and so that, I mean, that set the tone. It was awesome. and, and people would, there was this one, um, God, because you're probably going to get to this later, but when we took it on tour,
Yeah.
after we finished and we went to the Celebration Barn, um, and there was this woman who was sitting very close to the stage, and she stood up and she just wanted to thank Margaret,
Mhm.
right? That happened. Everybody talked to her as if she
Yeah.
was Margaret.
Yeah.
She wanted to thank her. She was a war bride, this woman from
Mhm.
World War II, and her husband had gotten help from Margaret to get her moved from able to immigrate to the
Mhm.
US from Germany, where her husband had met her. And every time we did a performance, and we ended up doing a lot of them,
Mhm.
um there were stories, there were
Yeah.
people, there were I mean, there were also questions, but a guy who was a little boy, and she had stayed at his house, and he remembered meeting her when he was a little kid, and just on and on. It was just moving, and it was funny, and it felt like it meant so much to those people.
Yes.
There was this one, I mean, I'll stop talking shortly, but there was this one, we did it for the Maine Women's Hall of Fame induction
Mhm.
in Augusta,
Mhm.
and there was this one, man who stood up and said he used to have lunch with her. He was like a reporter or something. I
Mhm.
can't remember the details, but he used to have lunch with her regularly.
Mhm.
And as they had, um, as she was no longer a senator, and he went on to other things. They had stopped that, but he talked about having seen her at lunch with somebody else, and this was when she was in up in years, and he just wanted to say how much those meetings had meant to
Mhm.
him.
Mhm.
And Sally went over to the edge of the stage because he was getting teary,
Mhm.
right? And she said, "Would you like a hug?" And he went up there, and it just
Yeah.
that's what I will always remember about this whole experience.
Yeah. Well, the first time I saw it, the first formal staged version that I saw was down in Lewiston, and I went with our former librarian who had been Senator Smith's personal secretary. And
Yeah.
the thing that I remember, which I mean, I enjoyed the play, but I remember Angie saying that after like the first 5 or 10 minutes, she felt like she was watching Margaret Chase Smith and listening to Margaret Chase Smith. And that was my assurance that Sally had nailed it, that she had created this persona that made people in the audience feel as though they were listening to Margaret Chase Smith.
Yeah.
And
Well,
then consequently, they wanted to share their remembrances of their
exactly, because you'd have to have the right actor to be able to pull that off, right? Um, no, and Sally had done a lot of research too.
yeah.
She'd been up to the library, she'd read books, she really wanted to get into this character.
Yeah.
And every now and then her accent would slip a little because
Mhm.
she'd work on the accent. But she's from Southern Ohio, and so sometimes a little Southern would slip in,
Yeah.
but aside from that, I thought she was just remarkable.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had that experience once. Hal Holbrook doing Mark Twain. After
Yeah,
10 minutes, you swear you're watching Mark Twain.
yeah, yeah. I've seen that performance. He was amazing.
Was.
Yeah.
So the other story I like, because there's actually a connection coming up, I think this was a performance that was done somewhere around the Augusta area. And it turned out that a former secretary of Margaret Chase Smith was there. And so again, at the end, she gets up and starts telling the story, I was your secretary, as if she's talking to Margaret Chase Smith. And out of that, she got connected with the library. And so there's still several of Margaret Chase Smith's secretaries who had been down in Washington, D.C., who try to get together periodically, usually when the one from Ohio comes to Maine for the summer. Sally Kincaid, and they will be coming.
I was remembering that her name was Sally as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
She was originally from Augusta, so every summer they come back to visit.
Wait, I just lost your audio.
Oh, I hear you loud and clear.
You're back. You're back.
So that group of former secretaries will be coming to Skowhegan next week for their annual get together, which again all grew out of one of them going to this play.
Really? That's awesome. Yeah. No, I that was in Gardner, I think,
Okay.
particular performance, and I remember that moment, and then there was another moment because Margaret in my play tells the story of that when Clyde proposed to her, that it was like more of a business arrangement, and she says no sparkling diamond, I think, and this gentleman stood up and he said, oh, she had a diamond, she had I'm like, okay, I don't want to argue, I just I mean I took a couple of licenses with the play, but I kind of had to.
So eventually we were able to bring it to Skowhegan, one of the women's clubs, of which a member of our staff was part of, sponsored it. I think it was several of the women's clubs. There were 3 women's clubs at the time. They sponsored it. We had it at the Opera House here in Skowhegan, which actually at one point Clyde would have spent a lot of time at the Opera House because it's also the town office. And actually, at one point, he and his brother had the concession to run the movie theater out of the Opera House. So it was a very appropriate setting to have the play. And so part of the point is did this grow into something more than you had ever envisioned?
Oh my word! Yes, absolutely. No, I assumed that we would do these, this production, these, whatever it was, 7 performances, 6, 7 performances in Lewiston, in a very small house, right? I mean, theater audience capacity, and I thought that would be it, and I didn't know. I mean, I thought people would come because it was Margaret, but on the other hand, it's we're years out, and so I didn't know how it would go, but it was like every performance sold out. I mean, it was just, and the audience response was just so enthusiastic. And so, so after closing, Sally Jones, the actor, came to us and proposed that, that we take it on the road. And take it on the road we did. And originally, whenever she would do performances, Stan and I would go. Stan providing all the technical support, and me, being Sally's stage manager and whatever, so that she'd know when to go on stage, basically. But it had a life longer than Stan and I could maintain, given our day jobs. Yeah. So then Sally took it on her own to a number of other venues. But yeah, I mean, we performed at USM, right? In Stonington, just in Rumford. So just multiple corners of the state.
And we still get inquiries about it. I would say 3 or 4 months ago, this one down in Bath called us and wanted to know what the status of it was. And at that point, I tried to get them in contact with Sally, but I think Sally has retired from the performance at this point.
Yeah, Sally's last performance, I think, was in Bath at the Chocolate Church.
Okay, maybe that's how they knew about it. They wanted to do it for, I can't remember if it was like a senior college. That's what it was. They wanted to do it for senior college.
Well, the play is now published. It's published
Okay.
by Oyster Bay Theatricals, and it's available for licensing if somebody else wants to do it. Yes, as you say, Sally is retired. The last time I saw the play actually was in Tacoma, Washington.
Really?
Yep, yep. Tacoma Little Theater, and
Mhm.
a friend of mine is out there,
Okay.
and she asked about about it, and I'm like, sure, that'd be great.
Mhm.
And so it was a good excuse for me to go to the West Coast, um, and that was a really different experience, right? Because it wasn't Sally,
Mhm.
and I had come to just think Sally, Margaret, Sally. I mean, and it was, but she was the woman whose name I can't remember at the moment. I mean, she didn't look like Margaret. She didn't sound like Margaret. Um, but it was amazing, and I was sitting there thinking, this is a pretty good play.
Mhm.
It wasn't because the words and so many of them in the play are Margaret's or derived from Margaret's words,
Mhm.
because the words are still meaningful
Yeah.
uh, and important.
Mhm.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many times over the last few years, shall we say, I was thinking, oh man, I wish Margaret were still,
Mhm.
we still had that voice
Yeah.
in
We
in politics.
we hear lots of invocations of the Declaration of Conscience.
Yeah, no, I'm sure, especially, you know, times we're living in now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on its success, and I'm pleased to know that it actually got performed outside of Maine as well. And like you say, if anyone is interested in it, it is available.
It is.
Yeah.
It
And
is.
and what Google search would you do? The title of the play or the actual publisher? Or
Yeah, I mean, the title of the play, but they're acting.
Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington.
Mrs. Smith Goes to Washington, and then I would put like stage play or theater or something, because I think there was a movie with somebody at some point.
Mhm.
So yeah, no, and I mean, we'd love to see Mrs. Smith again, actually.
Yeah. Well, again, congratulations to you on the success of the project, and you found a twist that worked.
Thank you so much, and thank you and everybody at the library for all of your help and support as we were putting this together, and for spreading the word about it and letting
Mhm.
people know about performances and all of it. So I thank you.
You're quite welcome. And I want to thank you for your time in speaking with us, and I want to wish you well in retirement.
Thank you.
Enjoy it.
I plan to.
Good. So long.
Nice to see you. Bye bye.